King of the Hill's first full-length trailer is dropped, and it is jam-packed with details about the upcoming revival / season 14. And when we look at it alongside the other teasers, clips, and images we've gotten, there is so much we can break down about the new season already. So let's get into it. And hey, if you like this breakdown, I've got tons of other King of the Hill videos, including other breakdowns of the revival clips we've seen so far, but also tons of character and lore videos from the original run as well. So if you dig it, consider subscribing and sticking around for coverage for the new season. All right, thanks. Okay, so the trailer starts with sort of your classic intense trailer rising string music sting and quickly showcases a few clips with the text, "For 15 years, we've waited for the king to return." Obviously, this is referring to the length of time between seasons 13 and 14, but within the narrative, it is also referring to Hank returning to Arlen, with this first episode even being titled Return of the King. But these first few clips are showcasing a bit of editing trickery. The first shows the classic Arlen water tower, which we first saw in the very first shot of the original pilot, but then we see Hank and Peggy driving a white truck towards a town with a different water tower in the background. If you look closely, you can see that it's actually darker blue, unlike the Arlen tower. Based on the water tower and the topography here being very different than Arlen, being a lot more desert-like, I think we can presume that these shots in the white truck are still taking place in Saudi Arabia at the Aramco base where Hank and Peggy have been living. We know that Hank and Peggy reluctantly moved for a propane opportunity so they can earn money for retirement, and that these Aramco bases are largely set up like small white picket fence American dream type towns. That Father's Day teaser we got actually started with Hank rolling down his window in this white truck and watching who I believe to be Peggy making some kind of deal in the market in full Saudi garb. So my guess is that this will be the opening of this first episode, and this scene is followed by Hank and Peggy driving back to the Aramco town, which we see here in this trailer. We also see that Hank and Peggy are driven back to their house in Arlen in a ride share, so another reason to presume that the white truck is in Saudi Arabia. Mike Judge and Greg Daniels have said the whole purpose of moving Hank to the Aramco base was to further put him in a sort of isolated bubble, so that seeing the way America has changed on his return to Texas is even more of a generational culture shock, and we pretty much immediately see that here. Hank and Peggy get out of the rideshare at their front door before we see Hank's reunion with his friends and neighbors, starting with Boomhauer. They seem to have Hank's attitude down pretty well here.
Turn the dang old king, man. Oh, wow.
Despite not seeing Boomhauer for 8 years, he is very uncomfortable by the hug he's receiving. I also think that Boomhauer being so affectionate might be a sign of his own change since sort of doing the family thing. We saw in the intro sequence that he seems to be in a serious relationship and has what I presume is a stepson, who we actually can see here in this quick shot, staring at a smartphone. Also interesting to note that he still has a mask, though he's wearing it on his chin, and I think there's actually a lot we can deduce from just this little detail. Obviously, at this point, nobody else seems to be wearing masks, so I think this implies that the boy's mother, Boomhauer's new serious girlfriend or wife, might be a little stricter and more paranoid about masking after lockdown. In fact, in the intro sequence, we see that she herself has a more heavy-duty N95 style mask, while everybody else has sort of standard cloth ones. And also the fact that the boy is probably sick of wearing that mask, considering it's on his chin. I also love that Hank's first instinct is to grab an Alamo and head to the alley to hang with the gang. I'm guessing this leads to his reunion with Bill, and I'm happy to say, for everyone who feared he had died from COVID, Bill is alive and not well.
I might have let myself go a little.
It's interesting he attributes this to Hank and Peggy being gone, as though that was keeping him at least in relative good health. He does look crazy with this full beard, and if you look in the corner here, it seems as though trash is entirely piled up in his bedroom. This also tracks with a quick shot from the Father's Day teaser where you can see that Bill's house hasn't been upkept, full gutters and a box on the roof. After this, we see a brief part of the intro sequence as Bobby says, "The world has changed, Dad," before Hank shows some frustration over a meeting, threatening to kick this guy Connor Feliz's ass over Zoom. I'm really curious what this meeting is about. There are two characters I don't recognize along with Dale and Boomhauer, and it seems to be a morning meeting with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. To me, it looks like Peggy is pitching something. We can see she's got some sort of poster presentation set up, and since Hank is still in his robe, he doesn't seem to have been meant to be at the meeting. I mean, there's no way he would ever attend a meeting with strangers in his morning wear. Next, we see Hank very confused by some modern-themed bathroom signage, with no idea which he's supposed to use, before another patron tells him they're both all gender.
Are we all gender?
I like how earnestly Hank asks this. It seems like he really doesn't understand the concept. After this, we get a closer look at a sequence we saw in the Father's Day trailer where Hank tells the rideshare driver he's going to give him a 4 so he has something to work towards. They really show that this guy is hustling too and that he just unloaded the hill's numerous bags out of the back of the trunk. So this actually is a pretty insulting gesture from Hank. Out of ignorance, of course, he doesn't realize that a 4 isn't a helpful score, and it is very Hank to think he's helping the guy by motivating him. Hank then says he thinks 5s should be rare in this world, which leads to the absolute most pitch-perfect Peggy writing we could have possibly hoped for.
I do not want to be conceited, but I have been told my whole life I'm a 5.
God, that is just so good. That trademark Peggy Hill overconfidence saddled directly to that trademark Peggy Hill ignorance. So funny. Next, we get a peek at Bobby's new life in his new restaurant, Robata Chain, as he welcomes in some customers with a couple of foreign languages.
Irashamase, dilkome.
Okay, so we actually know from the chef's bio that Gray Delisle posted last year that Robata Chain is a fusion restaurant in Dallas combining Japanese robata and the German heritage of the Texas Hill Country. Thus, Bobby greets these customers in both Japanese and German, with irashamase being Japanese and willkommen being German. Pretty neat. You can also see the influence of both cultures in the decor, with things like the bonsai tree on the shelf and these medieval German battle axes on the wall. Also on the wall is a framed newspaper clipping about the restaurant's grand opening, which, if I were to guess, I would say is probably not doing as well as they need it to be. These are the only customers inside, and Bobby is greeting them directly. On top of that, we see in the next scene that they have a rodent problem, which also seems to be happening as Bobby and his coworker are trying to film some sort of video on his phone. I have a few ideas about how this is playing out. That whole chef's bio that Gray Delisle posted last year also revealed some other info about Bobby's road to becoming a chef. It said that Bobby was a self-taught chef and one of the youngest contestants on King of the Grill. This makes a ton of sense. We watched Bobby learn to cook over the original show, and being a contestant slash personality on a cooking show makes so much sense given his love of performing and comedy. If I were to guess, I'd say that Bobby has at least a bit of notoriety slash fame from being on King of the Grill. We know that Bobby co-owns the restaurant with Chain Wasanasong, and they obviously had a bit of a rivalry over Connie when they were younger, but I'm guessing that they put aside their differences for this partnership, since Chain is likely the money man while Bobby could be the sort of celebrity chef personality attached to the project. He brings the clout while Chain brings the bag. And I'm guessing that Bobby's quasi-fame has translated to a decent social media presence, so this scene here where they're trying to film a video about these different types of meat may have been Bobby's attempt to drum up some interest in Robata Chain through his social media following. That might be a reach, but it all makes sense to me. To jump ahead to more Robata Chain themed clips, we also see Dale fall through the roof of the kitchen while Connie talks to Bobby at the bar, obviously implying that Bobby hired Dale to take care of the rodent problem that we just saw. And then we see a nice big meal at Robata Chain with Hank seemingly toasting to Bobby. At the table, we see Peggy, the Gribbles, Bobby's coworker, or maybe he's the sous chef who we saw earlier. 3 people I do not recognize who look pretty German to me. Am I allowed to say that? But I'm guessing these are the sort of German investors slash consultants involved in the restaurant. And then, of course, on the right, the Wasanasongs with their aged up models, Ted looking pretty old, and of course Chain, who looks quite handsome, and I'm very curious how the old love triangle between Bobby, Chain, and Connie might play out in this new circumstance. I would anticipate that this is either a celebratory dinner as they've opened the restaurant, or maybe after they've sort of found their footing at the end of an episode. I also think that this likely means the title of the first episode back, Return of the King, is both referring to Hank returning to Arlen and Bobby, who was a contestant on King of the Grill, returning to a career as a chef in a professional capacity. It's also a tiny bit hilarious to think about how Cotton might have reacted to his grandson opening a German-Japanese fusion restaurant, given that he seemed to have fought in both Germany and Japan in WW2. Yeah, somehow he was stationed in both places. I wonder if Hank will ever bring this up. Okay, backing up a bit, we also clearly got some clips from the second episode of the season, The Beer Story, which we also saw a tiny bit of in the Father's Day trailer. Now, right here, we've got an example of a pretty egregious Frankenbite, where they've basically cobbled together a sentence for the sake of a trailer.
Now Nowadays, beer is fruitier.
Nowadays, beer is fruitier. This is just editing tricks to get the idea across concisely in a trailer. They basically fake made a sentence out of other existing sound bites, so it won't sound like that in the episode. It's just for the trailer. But there are a couple shots here that we already saw in the Father's Day teaser. Bobby looking at this tube while brewing beer, somebody cutting the foam off of a beer. And of course, this story is going to highlight the generational divide between Hank and Bobby when it comes to beer, as Hank takes issue with Bobby's insistence that beer can be fruitier, citing his 40 years of beer drinking experience.
Never wished once that it tasted more like fruit.
This is for sure my favorite Hank Hill line in the trailer, and I'm so excited to see how this episode plays out. It feels like a perfect conflict turned reconnection for Hank and Bobby in the early stages of the revival. We can see a shot here of Hank and Peggy trying different beers, with Hank holding his hand over his mouth after tasting this one. Didn't seem to enjoy it much, though Peggy does seem to enjoy hers. This also seems to be at some sort of a local brewery. I wonder if a new brewery opened in Arlen that Hank's trying out for the first time and that he does not approve of. But Bobby's home brewing is definitely taking place in the Hill garage. We can see that this is just behind the new dual garage doors that had been installed during the time lapse in the title sequence, and I think that we are for sure going to be seeing Hank initially rejecting the idea of brewing beer and refusing to entertain the varieties that craft beer has to offer. But brewing beer is such a delicate, specific, diligent process. You know that it's going to speak to Hank's sense of hard work and integrity. In fact, we even see a shot here of Hank diligently checking the temperature in the homebrew kit. There is no doubt in my mind that Hank is going to get completely swept up in the process of brewing beer, and it will be a really cool and sweet way for Hank and Bobby to connect for one of the first times as adults. It's a really great episode premise. I'm very excited about this one. We also see the shot of Hank, Boomhauer, and the character we're all presuming is named Muhammad from the character listings, but still haven't gotten confirmation on, the guy who moved into the Hills house while they were gone, standing in the alley as Dale falls out of this trash can. Part of this scene was also shown in the ATX trailer that has not been officially released, so I won't show that, but there is an official image of Dale popping out of this trash can. Okay, here is a shot I'm very intrigued by. We see Connie laughing hysterically while Joseph looks wildly concerned next to Bobby and a horse with a giant gift bow on it. Bobby is also dressed up in a nice jacket and tie and does not look happy. Obviously, there are a lot of places this could go, but to me, this reads like Bobby attempting some sort of romantic gesture towards Connie, and Connie laughing at how ridiculous of an attempt it was. I could be totally off base, but the way Bobby is dressed up so nice, the horse having a bow on it, the way he's so upset at Connie's laughing, this feels like a failed attempt at courtship to me. And we know Bobby has done some foolish things trying to win Connie back over before. We actually get a glimpse of this horse one more time in the trailer in another very intriguing shot, Joseph and John Redcorn riding horses together across the desert, and this shot rules. Honestly, John Redcorn has aged a bit more than I anticipated he would. His hairline is really getting up there, but I love this new wardrobe and design. Obviously, the big question here is whether or not Joseph knows that John Redcorn is his biological father or not. Personally, I'm hoping that he does and that they've got a more nuanced, complicated relationship because of it. Obviously, you can see the pride in John Redcorn's face watching Joseph ride the horse here. It'll be really interesting to see how that relationship has evolved, if it's evolved. We also know that Jonathan Jost recorded for season 14 and probably season 15 before he was tragically murdered last month. So we will luckily get to hear his final performance as John Redcorn, hopefully for a couple more years. After that, it is possible they will recast the character. Jonathan Jost was actually the second voice actor to play John Redcorn. Victor Aaron played him in season 1, but he also tragically died before the show had even premiered. We're definitely going to see some memorial title cards for all of the actors we've lost since the original show ended. The trailer also shows Hank and Peggy line dancing, with Hank claiming he loves a dance with clear rules and instructions. Maybe one of the most Hank Hill lines I could have imagined. Great stuff. Or what do we think? Is he doing the cha-cha slide? Next, we see Dale kidnapping Hank, who is in a referee uniform, and this is one of many clips from what I'm sure is the 4th episode of the season, New Ref in Town, where Hank seems to have become a soccer referee. This is a very interesting development because we know for sure that Hank was never a fan of soccer from episodes like 3 Coaches into Bobby.
Why do you have to hate what you don't understand?
I don't hate you, Bobby.
I meant soccer.
Oh, Oh, yeah, I hate soccer, yes.
I wonder if this happens to be something that Hank gained interest in Saudi Arabia, where it's very popular. But like I said, we get a few clips from this episode, Dale kidnapping and chloroforming Hank, which is pretty crazy, and then interrogating him in his basement. We see him laughing at and smacking the hell out of Hank while he's tied up. Also, this conspiracy board is very funny, and I think hints at Dale's motivations here. Besides some silly and generic conspiracy cutouts, we've got lists of people who are trusted, ? And sleeper cell. And Dale has placed all of the hills in sleeper cell. I think that it's possible that Hank's newfound interest in soccer made Dale even more suspicious of whether or not he's some sort of sleeper agent. And, also I guess that he spent years in Saudi Arabia. Okay, I also want to point out, if you look at the very first frame of this shot, you can see the top of a photo under trusted, and it's definitely possible that this is the top of Joseph's head, but how damn funny would it be if this was John Redcorn? I hope it is. But Dale's soccer-based distrust of Hank would line up with the one Dale line we hear in this trailer as he's complaining about a kid playing soccer in the alley.
Cannot believe they're allowing it to happen openly in the streets.
People seem to be speculating that this is Toby Huss as Dale here, but I think it's actually Johnny Hardwick. This is definitely the 4th episode of the season, and we know Johnny recorded the first 6 episodes, so I think Johnny's voice is actually just a bit deeper in his old age, but maybe they recorded out of order. I guess we'll see. Hank's soccer reffing gig is interesting regardless, but I also think taking on this role has a lot to do with another line we hear from Hank in the trailer, where he says, "The thing that they don't tell you about retirement is there's so much time to fill." To me, that is another pretty interesting conceit for this King of the Hill revival. Hank is not only going to be confronted by a drastically changed world, but he's also going to have to venture out into that world to find new hobbies and interests to fill his completely free schedule. Things like beer brewing and soccer reffing. There's a ton of potential there. I guess Hank kinda says it best at the end of the trailer.
Peggy, I didn't retire to sleep my life away like some Nepo baby.
Not gonna lie, the Nepo baby line was the one line that made me roll my eyes a little bit, but nothing too severe. Just didn't really feel like something Hank would say to me. There is one very quick shot of Peggy smacking a phone out of Nancy's hand as she, Nancy, and Min drink wine in the alley. I kind of love the idea that the women of the neighborhood spend some time drinking in the alley as well, and if everyone here is retired, I guess it makes sense. Peggy's face is unhinged here too. I really love it. And the last thing we really have to break down are the multiple clips about Bobby's dating life. Hank tells Peggy that Bobby wants to have his new girlfriend over.
The vegan? What the hell am I supposed to feed her?
We see 2 really quick shots of this character getting very PDA with Bobby over the dinner table, obviously making Hank uncomfortable. This is basically a ramped up version of when Bobby was dating Marie back in the original series, who was of course a vegetarian that very deeply conflicted with Hank's worldview. But I like that this is the exact type of modern girl to really conflict with Hank's sensibilities. She's got a septum ring, the undershave, purple hair, she's wearing a crystal around her neck, openly PDA with Bobby over the food. I wouldn't be surprised if she got kicked out immediately after this. But obviously, Bobby seems to be dating this girl if he's taking her home for dinner, but later, Bobby accidentally butt dials Peggy while he's hooking up with another girl. This is definitely someone else. She has brown hair, and we see her glasses here on the coffee table. I think this also might be a joint in the ashtray, but that's besides the point. Bobby seems to be really getting around in the dating world, which shouldn't be too surprising. Bobby has always been very funny, personable, confident, and good with women. He had numerous love interests in the original show, and they also always made a point to showcase that Bobby was much more suave with women than, say, Joseph, despite being a little more challenged in the looks department. Now, we did get confirmation from Lauren Tom at the ATX festival that Connie is ethically non-monogamous, and certain other information that has been released also seems to imply that Bobby and Connie will rekindle their romance at some point, but I'm curious how this will play out. Bobby is clearly a ladies' man. The fact that he gets interest from so many women could make Connie jealous if they're in an E&M relationship. Connie, on the other hand, could date both Bobby and Chain Wasanasong, who are running a restaurant together. That is just a whole additional sitcom right there. There are some really fun, dramatic possibilities. And that is basically everything we see in the trailer. A little jumbled order-wise based on how I grouped episodes and themes. I think overall, this is a very solid trailer, and they are still affirming my belief that this is going to be a fun and worthwhile revival. They've shown how and why the sort of re-pilot for the aged up version of the show will work as a new perspective. And as far as the writing goes, it mostly really feels on point. If I had any criticisms of the writing here, I'd say this trailer does feel like it's sort of doing a checklist of all of the modern stuff we'd expect Hank to get worked up about. All gender bathrooms, Zoom meetings, Nepo babies, ride shares, etc. But this is also all pretty concentrated due to the fact that this is a trailer. Obviously, many of these things were going to come up, and I think that a lot of them will sort of be dropped into that first episode back. The premises that we've seen here are more than enough to get me excited about the revival. The beer story episode in particular, I think could be a really special one. It's got all the ingredients they need to brew a classic King of the Hill story. While some of these concentrated jokes to drum up interest might seem a little surface, I think the substance underneath that surface is really clear. Hank searching for meaning post-retirement, Bobby fighting to make his career work and navigating a love life as a young adult. I'm just really excited to see these characters in these new places in life. Now, there are other scenes and leaks out there that I haven't dived into yet, like stuff from that ATX festival, and of course the leaked storyboards that at this point I'm convinced are probably from season 15, and I don't think I quite want to explore all of those here since they have not been officially released. We did get that George W. Bush Museum clip, which I talked about over on my casual channel, and the writing seemed very solid, about what you'd expect from Hank. It seems like his distaste for W's weak handshake is dissipated over the years. The King of the Hill socials also posted this fake CAPTCHA image with a few new shots we've never seen, including Dale, Boomhauer seemingly working on a car, Peggy and Bobby in the Hill house, and probably most interestingly, a great look at the new John Redcorn character model standing next to Nancy. Nancy being in a full professional fit. Now in the rest of the show, she's been in a tracksuit, so I think this is very interesting and could mean that she and John Redcorn actually maybe just have a real professional relationship of some kind now, which I know was something people were really worried about after the intro implied that she and Redcorn had gotten back together. I'm eager to see how it plays out regardless. And we also got this great new poster, which also seems to be doubling as their banner branding on socials. Most of the gang is seen hanging at the grill in the Hill's backyard, with Hank and Bobby co-manning the grill. It looks like Hank is cooking steaks and Bobby is cooking the same thing we see him serving at Robota Chain in the trailer, so probably some kind of Japanese-German barbecue fusion. It also reads, "Who's ready for seconds?" which I think is a pretty cute tagline. It is interesting that we have seen absolutely no Khan so far, not even in the poster, even though we did get confirmation that Ronnie Chang will be taking over the role. I don't want to spoil the things we've learned from leaks, but I am very eager to see how the show explores where Khan is exactly in the series. It seems like that could be ripe for some really interesting, funny, dramatic storytelling. I was also a little disappointed that there was no GH in this trailer, though I know there will be plenty of opportunities for him to show up. Definitely an opportunity I do not want to see squandered. And of course, no real hints as to how Luann and Lucky have been written out, though I didn't really expect that to be explored in the trailer. I'm really just very eager to find out how they've handled that and hope that Gracie makes an appearance at some point. But that's all I've got for you, which I'm sure you'll all agree was entirely too much anyways. But what did you guys think of the trailer? Do you have any thoughts that I didn't have? Are you excited for the show to drop next month? Let me know below in the comments. Stay tuned for plenty more coverage. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny two cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny two cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.